Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our second public forum of the day. Those of you that attended the morning session, I do have a couple of items that potentially to update you on tonight. If you're new to this, I'm going to go through everything I went through this morning as well. I've received a whole bunch of questions between this morning session and the session that we have tonight, and you are free to continue those emails into ksheets@westcanada.org throughout the meeting as I'm talking, and you have further questions that you'd like to answer. I'll do my best throughout the whole session to answer as many questions as we can. We certainly have more information today than we had at our last meeting. We have even a little bit more information than we had this morning. So again, I'll go through some things today. I'll review some things that I think are important. I'm going to show you some new things that we have to update you on. And then once I get through that, the rest of the remaining time will be sort of a question and answer period where we can address myself. Mr. Doherty is with us today, our Director of Special Programs, Mr. Broadbent, our middle school, high school principal, and Mrs. Holmes, our elementary principal, are all in attendance today to answer questions as well. So I'll begin the meeting with a review of the instructional options that we have at this point in time. The instructional options we have at this time were to be submitted by Friday. I realize that some of the mail is getting here. We're still taking them in as of Monday and Tuesday. They're coming in the mail. But hopefully you had an opportunity to either drop that off here or deliver that to here. If we didn't receive one from you, we are plugging you into the in-person option on both sides of the building, in-person full day on the elementary side and the in-person every other day on the high school side. So if there's someone who hasn't handed that in that's listening right now that needs to get that in, that needs to be done ASAP. That's really driving what we're doing here in terms of classroom setups, teacher assignments, and teacher assignments for kids in the elementary, and our class schedules that we have going on. So I want to talk just a little bit about that piece of it right now and the assignments. One of the questions we always get this time of year is, when are we going to find out who our teacher is in the elementary, our supply list, things like that. Those are things that are getting put in place as we speak. We have most of the forms that we need in. We're getting a good breakdown of what options that were picked by everybody. And so we're moving into assigning teachers, and I expect you to hear that type of information, in the upcoming days. In terms of class schedules, we've been in the process of putting those together. Obviously, the numbers are dictating a lot of what we're doing with that. Those are going to come out again, similar time that they would come out in a normal year, end of August, just before school. That's typically when the schedules are finalized, and we're able to get them up into the portal and get those to you in an electronic manner. So that seems to have the same timeline as any other year. And again, I encourage you at this point in time, if for some reason you've got information you need to get to your building principals in regards to the options that were provided, that you do that as soon as possible. Again, just to kind of review the instructional options that we have that we're at this point continuing with. In the elementary, you have three options. You have the full remote option available to you, where your child will get remote instruction each day from home from one of our teachers here in the building. You also have the half-day option, where your children will get morning of core instruction and remote instruction in the afternoon. And then you have the full day option, where you'll have in-person instruction on a daily basis. In the high school, we have two options available for high school students. One of the options is the full remote option. Again, we'll put you into a remote full virtual schedule if you choose to do that. And we'll also offer the opportunity for the every other day in-person option in the high school. And in the first session, I explained those options to you. Again, if there's further questions on those options, feel free to submit questions on that, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. I want to move into the cafeteria and the lunch. I've gotten some questions on cafeteria and lunch. So during the emergency closure from March till June, and then throughout the summer, we were required through a federal program to provide breakfast and lunch to essentially anybody who was in need of that, with a reimbursement from the federal government in terms of funding for that. As we speak right now, the funding for that is a little bit different when school starts. So anybody who is qualified for free and reduced lunch will get free lunch, essentially. That's including a typical reduced lunch student. They will get free as well. For kids who don't qualify for the free and reduced, that will be normal cash price like we always have done. So whether we're in person or you're remote, full-time or remote every other day, half day, those kinds of things, you will have breakfast and lunch available to you. We'll discuss the options to get those, but I want two things to highlight here. If you're someone who typically is a kid who pays for their breakfast or lunch, or a family that pays for breakfast and lunch, you'll need to create those accounts to be able to pay for those in electronically is the best way to do that, but arrangements with cafeteria to make sure those are completed. If you are a free and reduced or potentially a free and reduced qualified, I can't encourage you enough to make sure that paperwork's in, number one, and number two, that if you have any questions on that program, that you get in touch with Mrs. Van Arnhem in the cafeteria or any of your building principals or myself, so that we can make arrangements for food and delivery and so forth. So for people in-house, people that are here in school, I'll start in the elementary. If you're here all day in the elementary, you're going to be eating lunch in your classrooms. That food will be delivered. Obviously, you're able to bring your own lunch and eat, but the food from the cafeteria would be delivered to the room where you'd eat that in there. For the half-day kids, we will pack up the lunches, and they will be able to take them home with them at the lunchtime when we take them home on the buses to eat when they get home. And for the kids that are remote, we will be setting up likely a delivery option to bring that food to you at some point during that day to be determined. So, around that lunchtime area, maybe around that normal time that we've been doing it from 10 to 12. But again, we'll define that as we get closer and get the numbers. Same thing for the high school, though. Same thing. A little bit different setup for the in-person in the high school. We're going to try to set up a couple different areas for lunches. Middle school, we're looking to deliver those lunches to some rooms in the middle school wing as we're trying to keep kids in areas and cohort them. 9 through 12, we're looking to set up schedules in their regular cafeteria. They won't be at tables. They'll be at desks and social distance in the cafeteria during the periods. Again, trying to limit movement and limit cohorting, or maximize the cohorting, I should say, that we're trying to do in the building. Again, if you're a remote or you're every other day remote, the food options are available on those remote days, and we'll get that information out to you and get the delivery of that organized as well. So I want to talk about some new items. I'm going to show you some documents that I want you to be aware of. We spoke about the surveys, the parent-student surveys that need to be done each day in the morning. I'll ask Elena, our tech coordinator, right now to post the survey on the screen for you to see as I go through that with you. Elena, just let me know when that's available to them.
All set.
Okay, so on the screen, you should be seeing the daily home screening for students. This is released by the CDC. These are the questions that would need to be completed each morning. Just for logistical purposes, I want to talk just a little bit about that part of it. Logistically, we would love to have this completed prior to the student getting on the bus. So, in the morning, the temperature check's done, symptom-free. We log on to the Google Classroom, and which this will be connected to, and the survey is completed and submitted. When the student comes to school, we'll be able to see if the survey's been completed for the day. If they haven't been completed, they'll have to complete that immediately once they get to school, because all these need to be done on a daily basis for us to do the in-person instruction. So certainly it's very helpful and cooperative if we can get that done before. It helps, but it is something that will have to get done each day. Again, we're going to try to essentially locate that all in one area for you, whatever. In this case, Google Classroom would be a platform. You'd log in, the survey would be there, and you're going to be able to complete that in the morning. I certainly understand that mornings are hectic for parents trying to get ready, get to work, get their kids ready, get them on the bus, all the things that go into the mornings for all of you parents out there. And I'm certainly sympathetic to that morning routine. But if we can get this to become part of that morning routine, that's certainly going to be helpful in this transition to getting us back into school. So just quickly going through this and highlighting some things. So the 100-degree temperature is the number right now. That is typically taken, as a normal temperature at home. So if your child has 100 or above temperature, that's an automatic to keep home at that point in time. If at any point in time through our testing they have 100 degrees or more, that's an automatic to be sent home. In an update since our last public forum, we are looking into being able to test the kids before they get onto the bus. We think that's going to be feasible now. So likely once the child gets picked up by the bus, they're going to be temperature checked with a thermal thermometer at that point in time. So if that temperature is higher once they get out to the bus, they're not going to be permitted on the bus. We also have temperature checks set up at the school itself. Obviously, parents that are dropping the kids off, they will be temperature checked at the school. And probably initially we'll be doing some multiple just quick temperature checks to make sure everything is good. But that 100-degree number is really a key number. And if you feel at any point in time that is elevated or raised toward that 100 and it's not normal for your own child, that may be a signal to you that maybe they shouldn't come that day. Sore throat's another big one with COVID. So if your son or daughter's has a sore throat that's pretty strong, that's not related to a normal chronic medical issue that they have, and it's not ordinary, then, those are red flags. The next category is new uncontrollable cough that causes difficulty breathing, students with chronic allergic, asthmatic cough, or a change in their cough from baseline. I think I want to stop there just for a second to highlight some things. There's always these questions. We're going to be very, very cautious, or we have to be very cautious with what we're doing with illnesses and sickness under the current circumstances. So this is where this cooperation between myself, the district, your principals, is really, really important. And no one knows the children more than you do. They're your own children. So, if things and symptoms are associated with typical chronic fall allergies, things like that, that's one thing. And that if it's something that's out of the ordinary, that's not normal for your child, that's another situation. It's really important that all of us in here and your building principals and your nurses are aware of medical conditions that may cause these things and look to get us that documentation so that we're aware of certain things that are going to go on. We certainly are aware of kids who have asthma, kids who have allergies and things like that. And the more documentation and the more baseline information we have along with you, the more informed all the decision-making can be made in terms of identifying potential risk issues. Diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal pain, new onsets of headaches, especially with the fever. Those are all things that you need to be able to check off to say, no, my child this morning is good. All these things, aren't problems this morning, so my child's coming to school. You also need to look at close contact and potential exposures. If you had close contact with somebody who was infected for more than 15 minutes with a confirmed COVID-19, if you've traveled, those are big issues you need to keep in mind. State travel outside of New York and where those are prohibited, you're subject to quarantines just the same as you would be during the summer right now, especially with the schools, and you live in areas of high community transmission. So right now, that's not the case here. And if it becomes the case, I think the situation would be different around here as it is. But right now, we know the cases are low. The transmission cases are low right now. So that's not something that's currently impacting us. But this will give you an idea of the survey. It's quick, takes a couple seconds. And if we can get that done prior to school, that's going to be very beneficial. And again, we're going to be checking throughout the day. And again, things are going to happen during the day. We know that. And I'll get to some of those things as we move forward here. Phone calls. So typically when you've kept your child home in the past, you've gotten or received the automated phone calls. Those are going to be turned off this year for a lot of different reasons. That communication between the school nurse and yourself is really, really important in two ways. One, when your child gets here, we realize there's going to be situations where in the morning things are really good and the onset of symptoms may come on during the day. That happens in any typical year we have. So at that point in time, that nurse communication and your ability to come get your child in an efficient manner is going to be really, really important. If your child is kept home for the day because you are worried about their symptoms or they're not feeling well, the nurse is going to reach out to you. And I would encourage you to, before that even happens, to reach out to your school nurse in the building and explain to them why you're keeping them home for the day, because we're going to have to evaluate each day, not only the kids that are in the building, but kids who are not in attendance that day, and find out where we are with symptoms and so forth with that. So especially if you're experiencing, or your child's experiencing, I should say, any of these symptoms that you're seeing on that survey in the morning, we're going to need to know about that. So that's sort of an important question that needs to kind of be decided at home and with the school itself. So the importance of that communication is going to be huge. And hopefully we can work together to make this as normal as possible and so forth. With that said, reasons to keep kids home might be a little bit different this year. Certainly don't want them kept home if they're able to come to school and they're symptom free. But if you're concerned about anything at all in terms of their symptoms, understand that if you send them and then we become concerned, we're required to basically put them into a COVID protocol at that point. What does that mean? I've talked a little bit about this later, but I'll bring it up. The separation of them into a separate area room, calling you to come get them, and then starting the process of the COVID investigation, essentially. But again, I'll get to that in a few minutes. Masks. Elena, if you could pull up the mask requirement sheet for our audience to see. I want to go through. We received a lot of questions. We've received a lot of questions on masks and mask breaks, things like that. The best way I can talk about this is that masks, and I mentioned this in our first forum, are going to be worn a lot here. The nature of instruction and teaching and kids, is not conducive to social distancing all the time. So we almost have to create situations where social distancing can happen. So where I'm going with this is I want everybody still to understand that the masks are required, that the masks are going to be worn a lot of the time during the day. And we're going to create situations and opportunities where the masks don't need to be worn. That may be a time where we can get them outside during the good weather and spend some time separated a little bit and have the masks off. It could be as simple as being in a classroom where we're social distanced at 6 feet or more apart for a length of time, 10 to 15 minutes, where students are working on their technology or their Chromebooks to complete tasks and assignments, and we're not moving around the room. So that may be an opportunity to offer a mask break as well. So there's a number of different ways that this is going to happen. We're really sympathetic to the mask wearing, the importance of it, and also the ability to have breaks from it throughout a school day. So we're going to work that into the schedules. We're going to work that in with our teachers. We're going to talk to them about safe chances to do that and hopefully create a situation that's comfortable for everybody. I do want to talk about the face coverings. I've gotten some questions on that, and our principals have done a really good job with this, along with our work with the Department of Health and some of the documentation from different research and the CDC and so forth. But if you bear with me here, I just kind of want to go through this so that we're clear. And then if you have any questions later, I can answer that. Face coverings are to be worn by all students, all staff, and all visitors throughout their entire school day and when on the school bus. Please bring your own face coverings and wear them at all times, except while eating breakfast and lunch and during mass breaks where we're able to social distance. Masks will be provided to those who do not have a mask. I mentioned this in one of the previous forums as well. We will have masks. We have disposable masks that will meet the requirement here. We can provide them. They will be provided with a mask if they don't have one. But I would encourage you, just knowing how this is going a little bit, to identify potentially some masks that your child can wear that fit them well, that they're comfortable in, and they're getting used to. And they could be getting used to that right now, in the different places that you're going where you're required to wear them. I think that's an important piece of this whole thing. Certainly, if the disposable mask is something they're comfortable with, we'll have those. If you're getting your own mask, I want to kind of highlight some places that you need to be aware of, whether they're disposable or reusable. They must be made with 2 layers of breathable material. They must fully cover your nose and mouth and secure under your chin. They must fit snug but comfortable against the side of the face, and they must be secured with the ear loops or ties, which allow the guests themselves or the student or the parent or whoever is in this building to remain hands-free. At this time, the guidance on this from our health authorities sort of prohibits the use of and these are terminology that you may or may not be aware of: neck gaiters, open chin, triangle bandanas, face coverings that have valves, mesh materials, or holes of any kind that are acceptable face coverings. So the pull-up over your mouth, those things in the school, they may be permitted elsewhere in some different settings, but in the school, we're looking for connected masks that are covering their nose and mouth. The valves are a complicated piece, and I have that listed underneath here: mask with valves or vents. The purpose of the mask is to keep the droplets from reaching the others and to aid with the control, the source of the COVID. The masks with one-way valves or vents just allow the exhaled air to be expelled out through the holes in the material. They can allow exhaled respiratory droplets to reach others and potentially spread the virus. Therefore, the CDC does not recommend using masks if they only have the exhale valve or vent. Some masks have that, and they have the interior filter and things like that. You can't physically see what those are without actually looking at that mask. So we're just kind of looking at that valve and that piece of it as being a complicated piece to the mask wearing in the school. We understand that this is a big piece of this equation. We're trying to do our best to be clear on the mask because we don't want this to be a large discussion here, and hopefully everybody's going to be comfortable and understand the system that's in place here. But this will give you a little definition to the mask requirement and what we're looking at here in West Canada. The transportation, I want to just kind of review transportation again. Transportation forms are coming in as we speak. You had those mailed to you. This year is really, really important that we know who's going to be on the buses and who's going to be on the buses on a regular basis. You know from previous information that we are very limited. 1 to a seat, unless you are a brother or sister. Masks have to be worn at all times. This is creating transportation routing and differences in our routing to get our kids here, which is the reason there are windows of time in the morning and windows of time in the afternoon in which we are dropping kids off with buses and dropping off as parent drop off and pickup. Just to review those times with you, the mornings for the elementary or the mornings for the middle school, high school, students can be dropped off anywhere from 7:30 to 8:15. We'll be starting classes right around 8:15, and pickup and bus transportation in the afternoon will be between 1:45 and 1:50 and 2:23 in the afternoon. In the morning, for the elementary kids, the drop-off will be between 8:30 and 9:15, and the afternoon we'll be looking at somewhere between 2:45 and 3:30 to get them out of the building and the transportation. And again, those times and bus times, once the buses are set up and the routing is set up, you'll be informed of both your pickup and drop-off time as we get closer to the start of school. A couple things about pickup and drop-off. We've must create ways to limit traffic, to create temperature control situations, and so forth. And so right now, our transportation, we're evaluating this, but right now on paper, For the high school, it looks like the transportation drop-off for buses will be in the elementary loop. Students will enter in through what we would refer to as the sports door, the door you come in for basketball and swim and so forth for events here at the building. And the parent drop-off will be in the regular bus loop that's in the front of the school at the main entrance. So we'll be taking in temperature checking people, obviously, at the main entrance, and potentially temperature checking people coming into school at the sports entrance. Again, we're looking into bus temperature checks as well. So there may be one or two layers of control on that side, depending on how we evaluate this. I think that's the best way right now to get kids into school in the most efficient manner and to maintain our safety. I did receive a question, I know, earlier between now and then about kids and moving through the building. Yeah, we're trying to limit them in their movement through the building, but on the same token, we've got breakfast that we've got to provide in the cafeteria, which is on that entrance, and we've got to get them to their classrooms and secure it. So the reality is in-person instruction is going to have some movement in the high school, so we think this is the best way. In the elementary, the bus loop will be the same as it's always been. We're going to drop our kids off there to be able to enter into breakfast or through the main doors, and parent drop-off and the loop inside the parking lot will be the same. If there are traffic issues with any of this or drop-off issues, we're going to adjust that accordingly. Again, that's the base plan for both of that. With that being said, it's really, really important that we have pretty defined transportation plans for you. I know that's hard because everybody has their own individual situations, but movement from bus to bus and available space on the buses is really limited right now on how we can do that. We're going to try to accommodate as much as we can, but please understand that, we're maxed out in most cases at 22 students on a large bus. Maybe a few more if we have some siblings on there, but no more than 28. So we're limited in what we can do with bus movement. So the more you can help us with defined pickup and drop-offs and stick with them the best we can. And if you can't, create a situation maybe where we can do some parent pickups on days where it has to switch. That's certainly going to help us with all this. This transportation is going to be crazy all over the place, and any help we can get from anybody this year would be certainly appreciated. I've gone through the temperature checks with you already. The other items that I think that are important and some of the questions that we've had are related to testing, tracing, isolation room, students being sent home, how can they return to school, those kinds of things. So I want to just talk briefly about those with you right now and highlight a few different things. So I want to clarify a couple things. At no point in time, even though there's been some governor discussion about this, are we doing any testing? We have no capability to test. We have no mandating right to test you or your kids or any of that kind of situation. What we are required to do is create a situation where we are working to set up testing protocols for students that are attending school here. And that work, just like I told you before, is through the Department of Health. So when that comes to a point where we're looking at symptoms and testing, that won't be done in this school. So I know we received some questions that if, your child came down with a 102 and temperature and we're going to start giving them a COVID test, that's not happening. We don't have that capability. And those of you that have followed the news can see that capability is limited in a lot of cases. So we certainly at this point don't have any ability to do that, nor are we going to at this point. The tracing. So once we have a situation where we have a suspected COVID case or even further, I'll talk about a positive COVID case. I want everybody to understand, as I mentioned last time, that the Department of Health, our school nurse, the school physician, your pediatrician are all going to be heavily involved in these processes and the decision-making that goes on here. So when we talk about a situation where we have a child who is experiencing some symptoms that maybe in the past we wouldn't look at it as anything other than an ear infection or potentially strep throat and send home and go from there, we have to look very carefully at the situation and be a little bit more cautious with that situation. So we have a child that comes down that's experiencing symptoms. Our school nurse may consult with the Department of Health and say, I have a child in here that is experiencing X, Y, and Z symptoms. I'm leaning towards sending them home today. What do you think? And they're going to help guide us on those decisions and so forth. If the Department of Health and our nurses feel they're there, we're going to call home to have them come picked up, and we're going to separate them from the student from our general population. Now, I know there's a lot of discussion about the isolation room. I don't even like that term. It sounds so harsh. We've got classrooms set up that are separate from our typical nursing business where kids are coming in to get medications and things like that. We have to pull them from those areas and isolate them for exposure purposes for the period of time until you can get there. So the quicker you can get there, they're going to be there, but they're not going to be put in some area that you're trying to envision maybe at home as being this isolation box. That's not true. We've got good spaces. We're going to give them good spaces where we can separate them and then get them home and start the process from there. So at that point in time, once they're sent home, we are then consulting with the Department of Health. And that's really where things take off in these situations. So you may be in contact with, or the Department of Health may be in contact with you to discuss some things. They're going to guide us in terms of the potential precautionary quarantines, the tracing. We're going to help them. We're required to assist them in that process. So, the easiest example I think I could give you, which isn't always going to be this clean, we have a kid come down with a 101 and a sore throat. Those are two key symptoms that we need to be very cautious of. We're going to separate the child at that point, call you to come get them, report that to the Department of Health. At that point in time, the follow-up with the Department of Health and your doctor and so forth is going to be important. Certainly no one can make you or your child go to a doctor or get a COVID test or anything like that. But the process of eliminating COVID and the quickness in that being eliminated is really going to be in the hands of the parents at home. At that point in time, you go to the doctor. The doctor looks over, does the throat, says, yep, I got a positive strep throat here. I'm probably going to give you a COVID test just to make sure it's just strep. And they're going to get the negative COVID test, and you're going to be dealing just with strep throat. And we may be able to get you in here as quick as you normally would have with strep throat or an ear infection or something like that. That would be the typical process. So there's three things that are involved with that: a negative COVID test, your pediatrician clearing it, you to come back, and the symptom free, which is always part of a return to school anyway. If none of that happens, though, and you're sent home with a sore throat and a temperature of 102, and you don't go to the doctor, you don't get any of this documentation, you will be subject at that point in time to the 14-day quarantine with symptom free. So, you need to understand that this is whatever school you're in at this point in time. That regulation's in effect for all of us. And in absence of information that allows you to return, you're subject to that 14-day quarantine and then an evaluation of symptoms from that point. So if symptoms persist, that 14 days could extend even further than that at some point. So, I guess my advice is that the quicker you get in to see a doctor and get situated, the quicker that turnover is going to be of a potential return, especially in a negative case. If there's a positive case, then that's where the tracing is going to come into play. If there's a really suspected case, there could be kids that are sent home, teachers sent home, a classroom, depends on how the Department of Health guides us on that. So, it could be anywhere from no quarantine at first to a classroom quarantine, to a school quarantine, to a district quarantine, to a school closure, all these kinds of things. So again, each case-by-case situation is going to be a little bit different, but there's going to be a lot of work with us in the Department of Health, especially for our districts that are trying to do this in-person instruction. If you can for a second, Elena, can you put up that tracing chart?
Yep.
Let me know when that's up so I can go through that.
It's up.
Okay, so in front of you, this is the Herkimer County Public Health tracing requirements that we have. You'll notice on the bottom of this chart, it says school administration, school health staff, and student support services provide information and assist the Department of Health for investigations as they request it. You sort of look at the bottom of this chart to start, and it becomes sort of a circular chart where we look at symptomatic contacts. The Herkimer Public Health will look at the symptoms, the child, They'll do some interviews. They'll be calling out. They're going to ask us for names of kids that are in the classroom. So you as a parent may be called by the Department of Health and say, we're looking into a case of something going on. We just want to interview you about your child and symptoms and so forth that are associated. As I mentioned before, you can see in this flow chart where the tracers will contact you. They may issue 14-day quarantines. They may clear you from that based on the information they get in the interview. Our job is to provide them with the information that we have and the contact tracing and so forth that we can provide them, and the Department of Health takes it from there. So the end result, I get this question a lot. Is there a potential that a child could have a suspected COVID test or COVID symptoms where you could be precautionary quarantined? Yes, the answer is yes. It could happen. Hopefully it won't happen too often, but that's going to be directed beyond us, and the Department of Health is going to kind of dictate those quarantines. So, just a lot to think about as we go into this. We're going to do our best to organize this place, to set it up safely, to keep the tracing and the contact to a minimum in this building, so that if there are situations, we're not forced into building and district-wide closures initially. So, however, if the cases and the safety warrants it, it's going to happen. So again, this is the tracing. This will be posted as we get into this week, so you have an idea of what the tracing protocols are. Hopefully I clarified the isolation room and the testing for you as well. I clarified also the students' return to school as well with you. The last thing I just want to cover before we get to questions is the remote learning, the technology that's there. We're going to be distributing technology to the teachers, the students. When is that going to happen? For the in-person students or the every other day students, we'll probably look to start to distribute that when they get here. For the kids that are taking the remote option, we'll probably look at organizing a pickup day for the devices and so forth. But again, everybody in this building will have a device. We need it if we're going to do any form of remote, and we also need to be prepared to go remote for periods of time if the health warrants that to happen. So we're going to be working on that. Mentioned some of the Google Classroom. This is even a little bit of update since this morning. Grades 3 through 12 we're looking at is the one place being Google Classroom, where it's going to be a one-stop shop for all of our instructional needs and requirements. We found, and the elementary staff has found, that Google Classroom is a little bit more challenging for students at the primary level, K through 2. So we're looking into a program called Seesaw for the younger students, which is similar to Google Classroom, more at a 5, 6, and 7-year-old level though. For them. So we're trying to remain consistent as much as we can, but we also want to make sure that we have systems that are in place that are conducive to our age groups and so forth. Again, I know right now for a lot of you listening at home, you may not be completely familiar with the Google Classroom, and but it'll turn into a simple login just like you would for any other online account you have. And that's where the resources for education, that's where the resources for the surveys and so forth will all be located. So with that said, that's my update for this morning. I expect further updates with you. Hopefully the communication is there for you. We're trying to use as many different formats to communicate information with you as we can, through global calls, through our email, through our website, through social media. Your principals have been contacting you. There's been a lot of in-home mailings. Again, doing our best in this environment to get that situation set. So with that said, I want to get to the questions and answers, because that's kind of why, besides for the update that people are here, I think tonight, I did receive some questions. So I'm going to address the questions that I received ahead of time first. I will turn it over to Mrs. Holmes, Mr. Doherty, or Mr. Broadbent if these are targeted questions directly for their building that they can best answer. So the first question I received is, do the kids still need to wear masks during gym classes? This seems like it would increase medical concerns like overheating, trouble breathing with physical activity. So phys ed and the scheduling for phys ed will be a little bit different. There's going to be a blend of phys ed instruction where maybe the physical activity is not going on as you would expect every single day. We're also going to create situations where we have the 12-foot or more distancing. Obviously, we're going to maximize the outside land that we have here at West Canada Valley where we can separate. So the answer to the question is no. There's no expectation that we're going to be wearing masks during gym classes. The expectation is that we're going to be able to social distance people in a fair, in a larger area and space so that we can participate in some physical activity. For the high school students, physical education, some of it is about educating students about, lifetime physical activity and so forth. So there's an instructional aspect with that. I realize, you think of gym classes or phys ed classes in the past, the way that they're set up where you go in the locker room, change, do your workouts, play your games, your team games, and then go back in the locker room and get ready for your next class, change up and get ready. So that situation is not in place. So even our phys ed teachers need to be aware that the design of physical education at this point in time is going to be a little bit different. I'm not sure we can go out and run the mile in our clothes and go back to class. So we're going to have to look at a lot of different things in regards to the instructional pieces of phys ed, how we can get creative with that, knowing that locker rooms at this point and changing and things like that are not permitted. Hopefully, as we move forward throughout the year, sooner than later, we're able to add in some different things here. But again, this is where we need to start with at this point in time. The next question is just wondering why we have the 7 through 12 bus kids coming through the side building and have them walk through the hallways instead of being dropped off at the high school entrance, just trying to understand. So I think I alluded to that a little bit. The cafeteria is located there, and there's a couple different entrances. Breakfast is a part of the morning session where we have this transition where kids will go to the cafeteria in the high school to get their breakfast and then take it to the room that they're going with, or eating it quickly in the cafeteria at the social distance desks that are in there. So yeah, I agree with you. We want to limit the movement, but we also can't congregate kids in the same entrances at the same time in the morning to try to keep things separated. So, and we were going to have a lot more parent drop-offs, I suspect, this year. So we need to create situations where we've got safe traffic flow and we're able to medically check students and so forth to get into the building. So very valid point. Understand your question for sure. And we certainly are taking all those things into consideration with the number of things that need to happen in the morning. The next question is this person, we don't get reduced or free lunches. Would we be provided free lunches during this time? I was just wondering. So that's the cafeteria statement that I made a little earlier. Hopefully I answered that for you already. The emergency closure situation was food provided to everybody at no cost. That's not the case once school starts in September. Free and reduced qualified are getting free lunches. Kids who do not qualify for that will have to pay for their lunch at the directed price for here. So especially for remote kids, we'll create systems in place so that if we're delivering lunch to a cash kid, that exchange can happen and money can be on an account and so forth, which is already in place. The next question is there will be some virtual learning. What technology is available for students and how do we access this technology for home use? So again, I think we answered that kind of in the presentation. Every student's going to get a one-to-one device. The primary level students in the elementary will be getting iPads, and the grades from 3 to 12 will be getting Chromebooks to use as devices. So those will be their school and home back and forth device. We're going to try to limit the amount of textbooks and things that are moving around and paper that's moving around, carry their locker around with them anyway. But we're going to try to limit that piece of being moved around and the paper exchanges and do as much digital as possible. So our teachers and our students will have that. The next question is lunches. How is the lunch period going to be worked out in the cafeteria and the classrooms? So I've kind of answered this. Glenn, Mr. Broadbent, can you talk a little bit about the middle school, high school, at least on August 18th, the lunch plan right now?
Yeah, so as of right now, we plan on rooms 33, 32, 33. In the middle school, we're converting to a cafeteria. We're going to be putting desks 6 foot apart in both that area and in the high school cafeteria. This will allow us to separate the 9th through 12th graders from the 7th and 8th graders. try to control most of the 7th and 8th graders, maintain them in the middle school wing at all possible to keep them cohorted, at least from the high schoolers. So we'll be moving lunch over there and cohorting kids at the same time. As far as the high school, it's, desk again, 6 feet apart, 30, 40 desks in the cafeteria. Students can bring bag lunches, they can purchase lunch, get their free lunch. So at that point, that's what we're looking for lunches right now.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mrs. Holmes, elementary lunch plan as of right now?
So as of right now, all of the students will remain in their classrooms for lunches. Lunch will be delivered to them by a TA or by somebody from the cafeteria. And I'll have the TAs covering the rooms to supervise them while they eat their lunch. And that will be paired off with specials. So they'll have a break in the middle after those, the first wave of kids leaves at the half-day mark. And they'll have their lunches and they will have their specials. And then the kids that need a lunch can take a lunch with them when they leave for the half-day.
Thank you, Mrs. Holmes. I want to pause for a second because I've got a couple of questions related to two things for Mr. Doherty at this point in time. I want to start with special education first. There's a lot of questions about the masks and special education students and so forth. Can you talk just a little bit about masks, special education students, and our plans for that situation?
Yep. So special education students are going to be the same as regular ed students. The rules that we have in front of us are the rules that we're going to have to follow as far as the masks are concerned. With that being said, we do have students who have aides that go around with them. We do have students that are in classrooms where there's more adult supervision. We will do our best at all times to alleviate some of the concerns that parents are having about that. Kids that it could be for any number of reasons, anxiety, breathing issues, whatever it is, we're going to do what we can to give them opportunities to get up, move around the building, and find a spot where they could socially distance. There's also barriers that we have in rooms that we've used before for like testing to break the rooms apart. We could set some things up like that so students would be more than 6 feet away from somebody else. They could take a little break there. So we'll do anything that we can to help alleviate those concerns. If those things are coming up and then that is a major concern of yours, please email me at school and we can look into whatever we can do to make the day a little bit easier for your child.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. While I have you on the line here, some athletic updates. There's not a lot of athletic updates, but can you go over where we are in terms of extracurricular sports, athletics, those kinds of things right now?
Sure. Yep. So right now, fall sports are still a go. The start date would be the 21st for that. Everything's been delayed since the last couple of weeks of August. Because of that, all the games and everything that we've had have been postponed till the 28th of September. That would give kids time to start on the 21st and still be able to get in the necessary practices that they needed to compete in events that start on the 28th. I don't know if the schedules are going to stay the same. There's been a lot of talk about regional scheduling with everything, but everybody's just kind of sitting and waiting for some direction to come down from either the governor's office, New York State Public High Schools Athletic Association, or Section 3. So if we're able to start on the 21st, we're going to go. Mr. Cool, Mrs. Tuzzolino, reach out to all the sixth graders in PE class and find out what they're interested in playing. Obviously, that didn't happen because of, it didn't happen to the fullest extent. I usually have them do it earlier in the year than later in the year in case the kids have changed their minds. So if sports are going to be go at the modified level, I will reach out to all the 7th grade parents and find out if any of their children are interested. But that's another thing I would have people be prepared for too. If in fact sports are given a green light to go, there's a chance it could be a varsity only, possibly not modified sports, just so we could get everybody on the fields. All of that is still very much up in the air right now. But if you have specific questions or comments, please, like I said, email me or call me at school, and I will give you the most up-to-date information that I have on it.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. I'd like to just add a couple things to that. So as Mr. Doherty mentioned, September 21st right now is our date. Those of you that have followed the athletic announcements at the state level know that the next level of planning pushes this off till January. So we'll be waiting for information on this that could potentially change seasons into winter, fall, spring, beginning in January, with 3 condensed seasons between January and June. So if there is a change to that September 21st start date, I think your expectation should be that the delay would happen until January at that point in time. And then again, see where we're at that point and revisit that. So we're following a lot of the guidelines. I received a question this morning, if you weren't on the line, about kids who have chosen remote learning and athletics if it starts. Right now, the state has issued, if you are enrolled in school, whatever the plan is that you've enrolled in for your child, as long as you are meeting the requirements and the credit requirements to participate in athletics, then you're able to participate in athletics. So, the option that you choose is an academic option for instruction purposes, and the athletic options are available as long as you're enrolled at West Canada Valley. So that was a question that I received this morning. Staying on the athletics, because I do have another question related to athletics on one that was submitted. Will sports physicals be provided in the school, or do we need to have them completed by our own doctor? Don't want to put you on the spot with that, Mr. Doherty, at this point, but do you have any update on school physicals at this point?
So as long as you had a valid physical within the last school year, that will carry you through the fall season. There is talks that it could extend beyond that if the pandemic rages on the way that it has been. But as of right now, anybody that had a valid physical for the fall or for last school year, that would get you through the fall season, even if it's outside of the 365 days that it was before. So if you can get into your doctor's offices, I know a lot of them are open. My boys, they just went. You will be able to try to get them done for the winter seasons, just in case. But if you can't, give me a call here at school, and I'll see if there's something we can figure out as far as Dr. Grace's office down in Little Falls. She has helped us out before as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Next question is for gym classes. And it doesn't specify high school or elementary, but I think it's kind of directed at high school, Mr. Broadbent. For gym classes, the girls are wondering about opportunities to clean up, as they were told there were no lockers for changing, et cetera. I think all the questions directed at girls in phys ed and so forth, but the no changing and those kinds of things. I don't know if there's a clean answer to this, but maybe you can just kind of address that a little bit, Mr. Broadbent, at this point.
Yeah, so as of right now, I have a meeting set up hopefully next week with the PE teachers. So we're going to be talking about some of this stuff and looking at options. With the locker rooms closed, it is a concern. We do still have the restrooms open, but we'll have to look at options and see really what we're doing in these PE classes and, try to adapt to these things.
Yeah. So this kind of blends into, the next question that I have. Will they have extra time for hand washing and hand sanitizing? So hand sanitizing stations are going to be in every classroom. They're in hallways and so forth. We are going to have bathrooms that are open, although we're limited to how many people can be in there and the efficiency of that. But we're going to do our best to create as many opportunities as we can. And that's, we want to train students and kids on hygiene and the importance of that being in a building here when it comes to hand washing and hand sanitizing. So, that kind of overlaps into, the phys ed question. We need to create opportunities where we can get hand washing and we can get some cleaning up and some hygiene done throughout the day, which is why we're building schedules where there's some opportunities for some transition, some staggering, and some use of restrooms. But I think the question leads us to think a little bit more about how we would define those situations, the curriculum, and how we're going to go about doing that. And that may be a little different in the elementary versus high school, middle school, and so forth. But certainly a high priority when it comes to hand washing and hand sanitizing and the hygiene piece. The next question I have is about the schedule, high school schedule. Will the schedule be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, then next week, Tuesday, Thursday for hybrid schedule? The answer to that, and I think Mr. Broadbent, is yes. Would you agree with that? It's basically an alternating day schedule.
Yes, there are some classes that will be not an every other day, like PE. They'll have physical PE, AIS classes, science labs and stuff like that won't be every other day. But they were not every other day under, the normal circumstances anyways.
Yeah. So I think the question, Mr. Broadbent, though, for in-person versus home instruction, it'll be every other day. So in theory, you'll be Monday, Wednesday, Friday one week, the next week, Tuesday, Thursday, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yep. So the schedules will match up in that manner. So yeah. So you essentially are looking at an alternating week of 3 days, 2 days, 3 days, 2 days. Again, there'll be some variations to that based on, holidays, things like that go on, but that's essentially the base of the every other day schedule. The scheduling is tough. We're limited to the amount of kids that we can have in the building at one time. We try to do the best we can to maximize the in-person situation, especially with the regional schedules of BOCES and things that are all going on, and trying to come up with a system that allows us to have some face-to-face contact with our kids, because we think that's important for instruction. And we wanted to do the best we could with that. We didn't want long periods of time without kids facing in person. So we thought the every other day option would be the best option. So you weren't multiple days in a row potentially without seeing your teacher, although, situations may lead to that later on. But at least early on here, we want to maximize what we can here. We're fortunate here. We're right on the fringe of that line of being able to offer some in-person. I think everybody's kind of seeing schools around the area that are a little bit larger than us. They're finding it's very difficult to do anything with in-person. So you're seeing a lot of high school remotes, especially in the large schools, the really large schools, but even schools that are just a little bit bigger than us are beginning to move to 7 through 12 remote right now. I'm sure there's some safety analysis going on with those districts, but I think the reality in a lot of cases is very challenging to get all of your elementary students in the buildings in some of those districts and get kids in the building, for more than one day a week or whatever and so forth. So we're doing our best with it. I know it's not the best case scenario for anyone, including us. Just trying to maximize what we can at this point in time. The next question is, when will kids find out what cohort they're in and which day they are starting school? So there's a couple different questions here. I'll turn this over to Mrs. Holmes for the cohorting in the elementary. You can just kind of talk a little bit about where you're at this point with cohorting and class assignments.
So by the end of this week, I'll have the class list done. Parents will receive it probably by Wednesday of next week. You'll get a letter from me along with the name of the teacher that they're assigned to, which is their cohort. And you'll also get a letter from that teacher and a supply list, and we'll be posting the supply lists on our website.
So for Mr. Broadbent in the high school, the cohorting is a little bit different. That's not really the cohorting we're doing there is sort of by grade level. Can you talk about how we're cohorting at least a little bit? It doesn't have to get too detailed, Mr. Broadbent, but just a little bit of detail on that.
All right. So for cohorts, first we're looking at when we're deciding students' cohorts, we're going to look at if they have a sibling in the school. We're going to make sure both siblings are coming to school on the same day. Then we're going to look at the classes they are taking. With 7th and 8th grade, there's less flexibility in the class schedules. So we're able to cohort a little easier. Once we get up until 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, it becomes a little more difficult. We will be looking at the math classes are in, the science classes are in, if they're taking sign language versus Spanish. And we'll try to cohort students the best we can to make sure those students are together for the majority of the time they're here. Worst case scenario, we're going to try to cohort kids by grade. So we may keep all the 9th graders together, even if we have a mixed 9th and 10th grade class. We may create a class for the 10th graders and one class for the 9th graders to do what we can as far as that. So we're going to try to separate them as much as possible based on what they're taking. And their grade level. As far as schedules and stuff, we're looking at end of August, early September. We are still waiting on a number of selections, whether you're choosing in-person or virtual. The sooner we can get those, the easier it will be to finalize those schedules. However, we will start moving forward is assuming that those who did not turn them in would just be in person. We have the counselors working every day on the schedules. We're getting close to creating a master schedule, and we're starting to work on schedules, individual student schedules, and cohorts now.
Thank you, Mr. Broadbent, Ms. Holmes. So taking it a step further, and I'm not sure if this is where this question is going, but which day are they starting school? So right now, the calendar that's been is available on our website is the calendar we're currently following with a start date for students on September 8th. So for the high school, if you were a Group A student, assigned to that schedule, your first in-person day would be the 8th. And if you're, a B day or a group B schedule in the elementary or in the high school, your first start day would be on Thursday of that week, on Wednesday of that week. So that's the schedule right now. Again, I know everybody's seeing some regional changes to calendars and so forth. Those things are still being evaluated at this point in time for every district regionally. It's this point and how we're getting prepared to come into the district. So if there are updates to the calendars or potential any changes to the calendars and the start dates, I'll keep everyone informed as soon as possible with those sort of changes or potential changes. The last question I have right now on this paper is when kids are home virtual, will they ever be, and the term used here is dialing in for actual class or just doing homework during that time to be submitted? So I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Holmes to start. Can we talk a little bit about the virtual, the remote piece? Obviously, there's some half-day kids that'll be remote, and there's some full-day kids that are remote every day. Can you talk a little bit about your planning on that end?
Sure. So the way I'm working it out right now, the kids that are leaving at the half-day mark are going to get all of their core instruction in the morning, and then they'll go home and they will have, their little break time. They can get on if they want to, look at what the special area teachers have posted to do some fun activities, and then they'll get assignments from their teachers. It could be a mix of stuff that they send home from the morning or that they post, and the students will work on their assignments, and then there will be a time that they can check in with a teacher to kind of go over that homework if they need some extra assistance, but their core will happen in the morning. If they're doing full remote, then they will be required to do the half day at some point with a teacher. Now, some of them may be opposite of the teacher that's teaching in the morning. So some of them may be logging on in the afternoon. Others, I may have a teacher doing 2 grade levels, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So we will give you an assigned time, but every child that's fully remote will be required to log on and get in-person instruction with a teacher for at least 2 hours a day. We're aiming for 2.5 hours a day. And then we'll also try to create in there at some point a study hall for them. I'm calling them online study halls, but it's a time for them to get on with the teacher and go over some of their assignments if they were difficult for them, especially the math assignments, because I know there were a lot of questions about that last year.
Thank you, Ms. Sells. Mr. Broadbent, can you kind of update a little bit on the every other day and the full remote students and how that's going to look? Obviously a little different for different classes and so forth, but maybe just kind of an overview.
So every student, regardless if they're every day home or every day in person, will have a schedule that on every other day, they will either be in class with the teacher receiving direct instruction or at home on a Google Meet receiving direct instruction through Google Meets. On the opposite day, students will be working on the materials that a teacher may normally do in their classroom that isn't, the direct instruction, maybe watching a video clip, working on an essay, doing math problems, answering questions. So ultimately, the way to look at it is the teacher should be looking at their lesson as a 2-day lesson plan and pulling out any of the materials from those 2 days that they would normally do that can be done independently and work on that. The students will work on that stuff while they're home on their virtual day. So ultimately, they'd be really doing the same materials over a 2-day period. The only difference is all the direct instruction would happen while they're on their Google Meet or in person. On their off day, they're going to be required to do, work throughout the day. I'm telling my teachers between 30 to 40 minutes per class. They should create some work for the students to take up that time in meaningful learning. And that would give the students, between 2.5 to probably 4 hours of work a day while they're home. So they would need to consistently get up, start about 8:15 and work throughout the day. And if they don't do the work for the day, they would be marked absent, the same as if they didn't show up to class at all. And we will be taking attendance daily, both for in-person and virtual. That way we can track those students who are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we can contact parents and identify students who may need some further assistance.
So thank you, Mr. Broadbent, Mrs. Holmes. So just to go further on that, the attendance piece, students' attendance will be taken every single day, and the schedules when they're not here will have opportunities for attendance to be taken on the day that they're remote as well, regardless of whether you're getting an in-person instruction at that time or not. The required workload and the required assignments and the associated work that goes with that class is going to be done during normal school hours, which is going to be the attendance, even if there isn't a direct teacher contact at that point in time on that day. Keeping in mind that we're running two different schedules and teachers are running their same schedule, in-person schedule on both days that they're here. Where as we develop the schedule and we get the numbers finalized, if there are opportunities on both buildings where we can create enhanced in-person check-in situation, scheduled check-in, scheduled meetings, any of those types of things that we can do to enhance the in-person instruction, we're going to do those. Anywhere where we're feasible to do that, we're going to do those. With that being said, the idea of, especially at the high school level, of independent learners and being able to design lessons that are part of a 2-day equation where kids are working on things they would be working on in class as well. We're going to design lessons the best we can in those situations. But I guess to alleviate the concern that some might have, is the off day a day off? Absolutely not. There's attendance. There's going to be requirements that need to be done. They're not going to be able to not do anything all day and do something later that night because, the assignment is due during, just as if you were in those class periods and so forth. So, so the accountability for all the days is there. And we're going to do our best to design that accountability so that we create a full week of education as we can. I did receive one more question here to kind of conclude things here. The question is, when the heating season starts, will the air filters be changed more frequently? So we had an engineer come in, do an inspection of the building, offer us up recommendations to our air filters. We obviously have CDC direction on this. Our architect looked at the building. So we are obviously going to enhance all of our air filters in the building. We're going to be opening up our fans, our exhaust fans, so we can change the air in the building the best we can. We're going to filter with stronger filters. We're going to change those filters more often. Obviously, during the heating season, that may need to happen more often. But we're certainly going to be changing those filters on a regular basis to maintain the best air quality that we can in this whole building. So we certainly have some directions. I think in our overall plan, we have some things written down that are important for the exhaust fans and the air intake and taking in outside air. We're going to maximize situations where we can get that outside air flowing and obviously, change the air in those classrooms as much as we can. So airflow is certainly a topic that we looked at almost immediately when we start to talk about in person, and we're going to do our best to make that air quality the best it can be during these difficult times. So with that being said, that's the last question we received of tonight. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight here at our night meeting here. This isn't the end of questions. This isn't the end of updates. Certainly, we've got weeks ahead here that could change things and add to what we're doing here and regulations and things like that. You can continue to email questions to the principals, Mrs. Holmes and Mr. Broadbent and Mr. Doherty in all the areas. I am always available for phone calls, emails. If after this meeting you have further questions or any other questions you'd like to ask, feel free to email. You can email Kay Sheets if you want to. You can email us all direct as well. Those questions will get to us and we'll reach out to you and give the best answers we can. Again, we're working together here. This is really important for us. We want to make this happen. And I think we can all do this together. So thank you for your cooperation. Thank you for understanding. And, I'll keep you updated as we move along. Elena, I think we're all set.